On the evening of 30th of June 2005, a 19-year-old girl left her home for what was likely meant to be a simple night out with friends. Jenny Nicholl lived in a quiet corner of North Yorkshire, England, a place where such events typically end with a safe return home. But by morning, she was gone. The next clue in a case that would defy easy answers was her car, left behind, abandoned but still running. The scene suggested an urgent, unexplained departure, a life interrupted in a sudden and chilling manner. The immediate questions that arose in the tight-knit community were urgent and frightening. Why did she vanish so completely? Who might have wanted her silenced? And in a development that would haunt this story for decades, why was no body ever found? The disappearance of a teenager is always a tragedy. But the absolute lack of physical evidence pushed this case into a unique and horrifying category. The investigation into her disappearance quickly uncovered secrets hidden beneath the surface of the quiet town. It was revealed that Jenny had been involved in an affair with an older man, a local married father of 2 daughters named David Hodgson. This clandestine relationship added a layer of complexity and darkness to the case, suggesting a powerful, potentially dangerous motive for someone to want Jenny to disappear. The story that unfolded was one of betrayal, manipulation, and eventually a shocking legal first, a murder conviction achieved without a body. The evidence was circumstantial, but it was also groundbreaking. Relying on modern forensic techniques and careful detective work that painted a vivid picture of a calculated crime. The man found guilty sits in prison today, a convicted killer, yet he has never revealed the location of Jenny's remains. His silence is a final, cruel act in a crime that has no end. The truth of what happened in the hours after she left her car is still locked away, held hostage by the one person who knows every detail of that terrible night. Jenny Nicholl was, by all accounts, a typical teenager coming of age in a small, quiet town. She was 19, lived with her parents in Richmond, North Yorkshire, and worked part-time at the local co-op supermarket. She had friends, a social life, and interests that made her a vibrant part of her community. She was a music fan, and she played guitar in a pub band called No Fouling, becoming a familiar face on the local music scene. She was described as having an outdoorsy and independent spirit, a trait that gave a plausible, though ultimately tragic, explanation for her disappearance. On the evening she vanished, she had told her mother she was staying out for the night, a common thing for a young woman of her age. She packed a rucksack, suggesting a short informal trip, maybe a camping weekend with friends in the countryside she knew so well. It seemed, at least on the surface, to be a spontaneous, innocent choice. But there was a darker, more complex layer to Jenny's life, a dangerous relationship hidden beneath the surface of her normal, happy summer plans. The man in question was David Hodgson, a married father of 2 who was 45 years old at the time of Jenny's disappearance. He had known Jenny for years, primarily through his daughters who attended the same school as her. While Jenny was enjoying life and embracing her independence, something was deeply wrong in her secret world. The affair with Hodgson was not a healthy one. He was revealed to be a possessive and intensely jealous man, angered by any hint of Jenny giving her attention to other men. The imbalance of power in this secret relationship was significant. A man more than twice her age, controlling and manipulative, preying on a young woman who was just beginning to explore her own independence. This dynamic created an unseen layer of danger in Jenny's life, a threat her family and friends were completely unaware of. In the weeks leading up to her disappearance, this danger was intensified. The police would later discover that Jenny had become close with David Hodgson's own brother, Robert, though Robert was unaware of the history between Jenny and his brother. To David Hodgson, this blossoming friendship was a final insult, a trigger for the possessive rage that simmered beneath his calm exterior. This secret life, filled with hidden jealousies and a dangerous imbalance of power, is what truly defined the final chapter of Jenny Nicholl's story. It is a story not just of a teenager planning a normal summer, but of a young woman caught in a web of control and jealousy that would ultimately cost her her life. On the evening of 30th of June 2005, Jenny Nicholl vanished, leaving behind a trail of confusing clues and unanswered questions. She had been at a pub called the Holly Hill, a place she was familiar with, and her car was found there the next day. The scene was strange. The keys were still in the ignition, and her mobile phone was on the passenger seat. This discovery was the first major puzzle piece in a case that would defy easy explanation. The fundamental, haunting fact of this investigation is that the body of Jenny Nicholl has never been recovered. This absence created a massive challenge for the authorities. How do you prove a murder occurred without the primary evidence of a victim? It forced detectives to think differently, to look for a narrative hidden in the everyday details of life in the quiet North Yorkshire market town of Richmond and the surrounding countryside. The contradiction that emerged quickly became a key focus of the investigation. While Jenny was physically missing, her mobile phone was active in the days following her disappearance. Text messages were sent to her family and friends, messages that seemed to suggest she was alive, simply away camping and needing some time to herself. They painted a picture of a transient, independent young woman making a spontaneous decision, but these texts were later shown to be fake. Forensic linguistic analysis would prove that the tone, language, and punctuation used did not match Jenny's usual style of communication. The messages were a deliberate, calculated deception, a cruel tactic used to buy time and mislead the police. The investigation led officers to the vast and remote woods surrounding the area. Detectives spent countless hours searching the dense foliage of Sandbeck Plantation, an area of woodland known to the main suspect, David Hodgson, as he and his brother had spent time there building hides or makeshift huts in their youth. It was a place full of secluded spots, far from prying eyes, a perfect location for a crime to remain a secret. But what looked like a normal disappearance would turn into a legal landmark, proving that a meticulous collection of small, seemingly insignificant details could, together, build an ironclad case that would change the law forever. The puzzle pieces, once assembled, would point an undeniable finger at a killer who believed his secret was safe. The police investigation quickly grew in scale, transforming the quiet North Yorkshire countryside into an intense search zone. Officers, volunteers, and even soldiers from a nearby military base were drafted in to scour the hundreds of acres of woodland, fields, and even septic tanks. The search was exhaustive, driven by the desperate hope of finding Jenny alive, or at least finding her remains to give her family some answers. The days turned into weeks, and hope slowly began to transform into despair as time passed without any significant breakthroughs. Then came the odd, yet crucial discoveries in the remote Sandbeck Plantation. Within one of the hidden huts that David Hodgson and his brother had built years ago, search teams found some of Jenny's most personal belongings: her nightdress, a cherished teddy bear, and a cassette player. It was a disturbing find. Why would Jenny take these intimate items on a casual camping trip, only to abandon them in a makeshift den deep in the woods? The discovery suggested an intimate knowledge of the area held only by a few and painted a sinister picture of forced abandonment rather than a carefree adventure. The phone evidence began to paint a picture of calculated deception that aligned perfectly with the discoveries in the woods. Investigators painstakingly tracked the movements of a man running a dual life. They found that David Hodgson had specifically hired cars on 2 key dates: July 9th and July 14th, days after Jenny vanished. The mileage on those rented vehicles corresponded almost perfectly with trips to remote locations in Cumbria, near Carlisle, and the Scottish borders. These were the exact areas from which those fake, reassuring text messages had been transmitted from Jenny's phone. He was meticulously staging an alibi, a desperate attempt to cover his tracks and create the illusion that Jenny was still alive and moving around the country. The family experienced a relentless cycle of hope and despair, and every new lead, every item found in the woods, brought a fresh wave of agony. They knew in their hearts something terrible had happened, but the lack of a body meant they couldn't fully give up hope. The police were building a powerful, circumstantial case, connecting the dots between Hodgson's movements, the abandoned belongings, and the digital footprint. They had the motive, the opportunity, and evidence of a massive cover-up. Then came the moment that changed everything and turned this case into a legal landmark: the introduction of forensic linguistics. The investigation started to map the complex web of relationships that Jenny Nicholl had formed in her small world. At the centre of the suspicion was naturally the married man she was having an affair with, David Hodgson. But the picture was not that simple, and investigators had to look at all possible scenarios. A vital piece of information that emerged was that, around the time of her disappearance, Jenny had also been seeing David's older brother, Robert Hodgson. Robert was completely unaware of the long-standing, secret relationship his brother had with Jenny. This created a complicated and volatile dynamic that the police had to untangle. Could Robert have had a motive? The motives pointing toward David Hodgson, however, were intense and deeply personal. There was a significant age gap, over 25 years. That suggested a power imbalance from the start. This age disparity in a relationship between an adult and a young person raised serious concerns about the nature of their involvement and the potential for manipulation. David Hodgson was known to be intensely jealous and possessive. The idea that Jenny was now spending time with his own brother likely pushed him over a psychological edge, suggesting a crime driven by rage and a need to maintain absolute control. However, David Hodgson always maintained his innocence regarding the most serious allegations. During the trial, his defense claimed the affair had ended at a full year before she disappeared, attempting to sever his connection to the timeline of the crime. But his explanations did not align with the facts the police were uncovering. His phone data, his actions of hiring cars to send fake texts, and the discovery of Jenny's intimate items in his known hiding spot all strongly contradicted his narrative of an affair that had ended long ago. The evidence created a powerful, undeniable pattern of deceit and calculated movement. It left investigators, and later the jury, to consider the true nature of this dark relationship. Was this a case of pure obsession, a thirst for power, or perhaps a toxic, fatal combination of both? The suspect web was intricate, but the evidence was slowly and surely tightening around one man whose jealousy seemed to know no bounds. The turning point in the investigation, the undeniable proof that this was a murder case and a calculated cover-up, arrived with the introduction of highly specialized evidence that few expected. It wasn't traditional DNA analysis, although that played a role, but the analysis of language itself. Forensic linguists studied the text messages sent from Jenny's phone after she disappeared. They compared these to genuine messages written by both Jenny and David Hodgson. The results were startling and precise. The messages sent after June 30th were not in Jenny's style at all. Instead, they contained specific linguistic quirks and writing patterns characteristic of David Hodgson. The use of certain colloquialisms, like writing me instead of my, or me-self instead of myself, became key evidence that proved the authorship of the texts beyond a reasonable doubt. the messages designed to mislead the police became the most powerful evidence against the sender. Further DNA evidence solidified the case against Hodgson, contradicting his earlier denials of a continued relationship. Traces of his DNA were found on some of Jenny's personal belongings, like the nightdress and the teddy bear discovered in that remote woodland hut in Sandbeck Plantation. This evidence placed him directly in the intimate space where Jenny's items were dumped, aligning perfectly with the movements of the hired cars and the fake texts. By February 2008, the case went to court. It was a groundbreaking trial, with David Hodgson charged with Jenny's murder despite the stark absence of her body. Such no-body convictions are extremely rare in UK law, making this trial a landmark moment in British legal history. The prosecution was able to weave together a complex web of circumstantial evidence into an unassailable case. The jury returned a guilty verdict. In a highly emotional moment, the judge sentenced David Hodgson to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 18 years. The judge highlighted the callousness of the crime and the additional cruelty of refusing to reveal where Jenny's body was. For Jenny's family in the courtroom, there was a profound mix of relief and ongoing pain. They had justice. They knew who took their daughter's life. Yet, the conviction did not bring closure. The silence remained, and the body of Jenny Nicholl remained lost to the world, a devastating final act of control by a convicted killer. The conviction brought a legal resolution, but for the family of Jenny Nicholl, the emotional fallout of the crime continued and deepened. The agony of not having her remains became a daily, unending torment. Brian and Anne Nicholl couldn't perform the simple, vital ritual of burying their daughter, of having a grave site to visit, mourn, and remember her. The absence was constant, a physical representation of the killer's continued control over them. In countless public appeals, they voiced their pain, pleading with the convicted David Hodgson to "tell us where you dumped her body," a heartbreaking phrase that echoed across the nation. The case of Jenny Nicholl, alongside other similar cases like that of Helen McCourt, highlighted a significant, cruel loophole in British law. Killers could maintain their silence, deny families closure, and still be eligible for parole after serving their minimum sentence, without any formal consequence for that specific act of cruelty. This injustice sparked a powerful public and legal campaign that led to the creation of Helen's Law. This landmark legislation, officially the Prisoners' Disclosure of Information about Victims Act 2020, changed the rules for the parole board. Now, a killer's refusal to reveal the location of their victim's body is a crucial factor for the board to consider when assessing them for release. It means that silence is no longer a neutral position. It is an impediment to freedom, a legal acknowledgement of the immense power the killer wields from his cell. The community reaction in Richmond was one of shock and sustained sadness. The case haunted North Yorkshire policing for years, becoming a defining investigation and a benchmark for how to pursue a no-body murder conviction. It was a stark reminder that beneath the quiet surface of any town, dark secrets can lurk. The story of Jenny Nicholl is one of justice achieved in the courtroom, but also a haunting tale of truth denied in the real world. David Hodgson is behind bars, a convicted murderer, but the silence he maintains is an unending punishment for the family he left behind. If the body was never found, we are left to wonder, where is Jenny? Is she buried deep in the woods of Sandbeck Plantation, forever hidden beneath the roots and soil? Will the truth ever fully emerge, or is the location of her final resting place a secret that will die with her killer? We are forced to reflect deeply on what the word justice truly means. Does justice mean only the conviction of a guilty man, ensuring he serves time for his crime? Or does true justice also require closure, the ability for a family to mourn, to have a grave to visit, and to finally say goodbye? The case forces us to look closer at our own lives and communities. The people involved were neighbours, friends, and family in a quiet, normal town. It begs a difficult question. Could a dark secret like this happen in your own community, right under your nose? The manipulation, the jealousy, the capacity for such a heinous crime, these things exist everywhere. The silence that has lasted for nearly 2 decades is a powerful reminder that some stories never truly end. They linger, unfinished and unresolved. We want to hear from you. What do you think really happened in the final moments of Jenny's life? What do you believe would finally make a silent killer speak after all this time? Share your thoughts below in the comments.